let's kind of put some first principles together, and then we'll build on those. So we know that the free market, the natural state of a free market, is deflation. Right? We know that in a free market, prices tend to fall to the marginal cost of production. So just from those two statements, if those are true, it's also true that we've never lived in a global free market for any length of time. As a derivative, we've always lived in a control system, and that control system that was through broken money kept on getting worse and worse till a time where it would convince people to go to war. First split the country, then convince people to go to war, to reset currency, to then start again. 5,000 years of human history prove to us that we've never had a truly global free market for any length of time. And another first principle is free markets are far more productive, because there's more shots on net so when the U.S., the entire Constitution and bill, everything around the U.S. was around creating a free market to get out of the trap of Britain, right, and to give individual rights and freedoms to people. And the Constitution was a document to protect those rights, which created a superpower out of those rights, because it was more productive. People moved from all over the world to the U.S. to take advantage of that, more productive, and then it too got captured over time. And the capture over time, because it happens so slowly, people don't notice it's happening. So the Constitution or Magna Carta before that, any time you introduced individual rights and freedoms, economy was more productive, and it created a trend to people moving there to take advantage of that, and you saw more opportunities, and we are a part of that. So you could see individual times throughout history that it was more free in a certain market, and the abundance that was created out of that. And then over time, that abundance would get captured by the state, and it would trend towards something else, more controlled, and then it would trend towards capitulating on itself and going to war to try to reset the currencies, and then you'd promise not to do it again, and it would start again, right? So that's an entire history through the monetary lens of us, and saying, really, in 5,000 years of human history, we've never had a globally free market for any length of time, and so that's a fact, right? And so out of that fact, or out of that first principle, then we always must have lived in a control system, and that control system would have to capture our attention, more and more of it, capture more of our individual rights and freedoms, to be able to gain control over us and convince us that it was okay to go to war and create in the name of freedom, right? So if you look at those two patterns, those are both true. Both statements are true. We've never seen it. No history book has ever seen it. No economic system has ever seen it. No political system has never seen it. And then we have a new protocol bounded by energy, open, decentralized, and secure protocol bounded by energy, Bitcoin, which imposes the free market, which for the first time in history, you couldn't cheat that. So it imposes all prices relative to Bitcoin falling forever to the marginal cost of production. And every new person that's moving their time into that system is adding their intelligence, ideas, acceleration to the free market, which is prices in Bitcoin will tend towards the marginal cost of production, or prices forever will fall against Bitcoin. That's what it would look like. And I say, if it stays decentralized and secure. So now, if those things are true, we've never had it, then then it's also true that we've always measured a system by the system, and we're inside that system measuring the system. And it's also true that we couldn't measure Bitcoin because there's nothing to measure it against yet. Or you can measure other things against it, prices falling, and you'd see all prices fall, energy prices fall, house prices fall, all prices fall, according to Bitcoin, which you would expect to happen. But now go back to if in 5,000 years we've never had a currency that has resisted that manipulation, then we must be one of the things, all of us must be part of the equation that allows the centralization. We must be, because there are lots of smart people in 5,000 years of human history that knew the same things we're talking about now, and all currencies have always been centralized.
I think that's a bit of I would hope, eye-opening moment for a lot of people, realizing that despite the best efforts of people far more brilliant than us throughout history, and there have been a lot of them, that still the status quo did not meaningfully change. Yeah. There wasn't really a departure from that status quo. It may have looked a little bit different. It may have, had a different color paint on it, but it was ultimately still the same thing. Yeah. And we didn't get away from it.
And so if that's true, and it is true, right? We know it's true. Then you'd have to have a really high bar on the attacks that were going to come to Bitcoin, like a staggeringly high bar on why it would likely be centralized, and what would happen to be able to centralize it, because most people fall into the trap throughout history of pricing in whatever currency they're in and allowing that centralization, essentially making trade-offs, short-term trade-offs versus long-term. And if we've never gotten out of it before, what's to think that we would this time? So that's the high bar that I think of Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin layer 1 being decentralized and secure for now 15 years, and getting more secure, more decentralized. I'm not saying that there aren't still some risks there. I'm not saying mining pools, but what I can see is, I think enough people understand what this means for humanity, and what they're doing is constantly vigilantly looking for risks, and rectifying and becoming, that's kind of in Bitcoin maxi terms, that's what you're doing, right? You're vigilant for attack vectors, and you're constantly looking for attack vectors, because once you're out of this crazy matrix, and you also know what the high importance of decentralizing security for humankind going forward. You know why that's such an important concept. So I think that Bitcoin layer 1, I see very little risk in layer 1 because of what I just said. But probably 2-3 years ago, I said, okay, if I knew everything I know, and there's lots of smart people around, they must know everything too. And you lost layer 1. You couldn't choke off layer 1. You couldn't stop it. It kept on going. How would you stop Bitcoin at layer 2, and then use layer 2 to attack layer 1? And I think we're really early in the path of that actually happening. And why would that happen if you just tie the 5,000 years? Because most people are pricing in US dollars. They're pricing Bitcoin in US dollars. They're pricing all their assets in US dollars. And these two systems are incongruent together. One is the free market, prices fall forever. One is prices rise forever. They're completely incompatible. And when somebody says they're compatible, they're not. They're only compatible if you subsume the base layer and you can fractionalize it to make prices go up. That makes sense?
I think it does. And, because I want to get into very much so the kind of the risks associated with layer two on Bitcoin, and beyond layer two, but everything that's not layer one. I want to dive into that because I think that's a really important thing for people to understand both the risks, but also the massive opportunity that we have because there's a lot of incredible technology being built right now. Mm-hmm. But maybe it would be helpful too, just for folks, let's say they have somehow have not heard you speak before, have not listened or read your book, do not understand what is so broken with this current system, because I think that it's difficult for people, especially in, let's say, the so-called Western or developed world, to sometimes understand why the heck these psychopathic Bitcoiners seem to care so much about this magic internet money and why they think things are so bad. Because, my house is getting growing in value, quote. It's because we have a broken measuring stick, but my stocks are up. Things are okay. Why? Yeah, there's some people in other parts of the world struggling, but really, I don't see anything too bad. Can you talk a little bit, just before we get into the other layers of Bitcoin and what's happening there? Just this idea that I think it's very difficult to understand is the idea of deflation, that something you've talked about in your book, The Price of Tomorrow, which was a light bulb moment for me and many other Bitcoiners. I think is that technology is naturally deflationary. Everything should be getting cheaper, but it's not. And somehow we've been conditioned to expect that actually the natural state is that everything just gets a little bit more expensive every year by, quote, 2% or whatever the CPI is. Or, could you talk a little bit about maybe why people are so willing to accept that as the norm? Is it just because we've been conditioned for so long? I mean, is that just purely what it is?
Your mental model, and most people's mental model of how the world works, is based on the flawed assumption that prices go up, and they don't have you could say, you don't have the architecture in your brain to until you hear it multiple times to hang this idea off of that prices should fall. So you can hear the words, the free market is deflationary, and then you could go right back to the world you live in, and you go, and then you might not be able to see that the world that you're living in, prices going up, has to be based on theft then. And you might not see it, you can't connect the dots because it's so hard until you realize the depth of what I said when I said the free market is deflationary. The natural state of the free market. And why is that so? It's really easy. You only use things that give you more value. And every entrepreneur globally is competing to try to give you more value. And not just every entrepreneur, every person who's working for an entrepreneur. Every team is trying to compete to give you more value on a global competitive level. So the only reason that couldn't reach you in giving you more value is something stopping it from giving you more value. And what's stopping it from giving you more value is massive monetary printing to extract that wealth that should flow to you in the form of lower prices. And by the way, let's just stay on that for a second. So if that's true, and then Walker, you start a business tomorrow, and if you don't automate your business and remove labor with AI and machines, then no one uses your business and your business fails. And so you're forced to, you have to be more competitive. It's ruthless to be more competitive. And then the output of that is people win because prices fall. If we lived in that world, then today, and you can't know this exact number because it's unknowable from the existing system, but I would project that the natural rate of deflation in the market today is about 5%. So every year you would get richer by 5%, even if you did nothing. But the next year, because more people would join that, more competition, the next year would be 7.5%. The next year would be 15%. You get richer by 15% a year or 30% a year as technology, AI, automation, robots do more of the work and allow prices to fall faster. And every day, every year, you're getting richer. And as 8 billion people move, because today we have a system that where where really you have 500 million winners, or really a small fraction of 500 million winners, like 8 people with with 50% of the wealth of the world. And then you have another balance which are the 1%ers, and then you have the rest of 500 million who are extracting from 7.5 billion people. And those 7.5 billion people, they cannot think like we're thinking right now to be able to contribute to a world that's getting better and better. They're stuck as slaves in an operating system, scared to death of how do I make enough money to pay my bill, which perpetuates the slavery further and further and further, and they're getting further and further away, and they're wondering, how do I keep up? So they're so driven away from a productive society. They're stuck in that loop. And so I have massive empathy for why many of those people can't see what I'm talking about, because they're so far away from what's happening. It would be easy to believe somebody else can solve their problem. So you have to look at what both systems are doing, and so what we just described is we've never lived in a world where 8 billion people were in service of 8 billion people, and prices fell forever. And it would be really hard if you didn't have the mental lattice for what that world would look like. And who would, if you'd never seen it before and no history book ever showed it before, who would have that mental lattice? It would really be hard to describe that to people who don't feel like they're experiencing it from the other system. And so that's why even in my book, that you could read it today. One of the things that makes me probably most proud about that book is people read it over and over and over again, and then the light bulb goes on. The light bulb goes on and once you're measuring from that system, and if Bitcoin stayed decentralized and secure, what I'm talking about is inevitable. No matter what. It doesn't matter if the existing system prints $2 trillion, $8 trillion, $50 trillion. It's just different pieces of paper. And Bitcoin measured against a piece of paper will look like it's going up. But all prices relative to Bitcoin are actually going down and will forever.
Including the price of fiat money, which is, I think, again, it's why people fail to flip it.
Abundance and money create, or marginal cost of production. What's the marginal cost of production of a fiat unit? 0. It's worth 0. It's a piece of paper. It's just a piece of paper describing what you believe it as, and you're valuing, and most people are pricing the world from something that has no value over time. It's going to 0 against Bitcoin anyways.
I think that this is such an important point, and what you mentioned about, the overwhelming majority of the world not having the architecture yet to be able to understand this. And then you can empathize and sympathize with those people to realize, well, this is why they are always looking for political solutions to problems. Always assuming that, well, if we just get the right person in office next time, they've promised that they're going to do X, Y, Z. But ultimately, their promise is, what's underlying the promise is the same guarantee, which is that the money supply will be expanded. And that expansion of the money supply is a blunt instrument.
It's so important to put an exclamation point on what you just said, right? Voting for somebody within the existing system. I'm not saying you shouldn't vote, and somebody that might say Bitcoin versus somebody who's going to try to make it harder is probably more worth your vote. But all votes within the existing system are really a vote to who gets more of the theft that comes from you. It's just theater. It's complete theater. And all of the theft, but now let's go back to 5,000 years of human history. All of those people before us were always tricked. What's to make you think that you're not being, right? And so you have to be really critical thinking in what's happening here. If this change, and when I looked at Bitcoin specifically, and when I tried to kill Bitcoin specifically, and when I tried to attack it, all of these lenses for how it would be attacked, I've thought through at deep level, because what's kind of the 5,000 years of human history, and even today, you look around at people predicting the future, most people don't predict the future. They predict the present forward. Right? They can't, and then they get on TV again. Keep making the same mistake over and over and over again, and they say the same thing, and they make a new prediction, and they're still on TV, and people follow them all. It's crazy. Like if you look at it, it's almost like a inverse bias. If you're more wrong more often, you get if you're but really strong in your beliefs and being wrong, you're constantly in the media.
We'll call it the Peter Schiff paradox, maybe. Something like that. No, I think it's a really important point. I mean, it's like, it goes back, was it Einstein who said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results? Yeah. That's essentially what we have when you're operating within the current system, when you're still trying to affect change. I think, I believe it was you, and it may have been in our last talk, where you said, you can't change a system from within the system.
Yeah.
And you can't measure it either.
You can't measure it either. And then you have to come to the terms that what I said before about the 5,000 years, all of that was from within the system, thinking that there's a change from within the system, and they constantly get captured in the same thing. So what makes us any smarter this time? We have to be smarter, to be able to play a different game. We have to think at that abstract level, what is the game that's being played, and how would it be concentrated? What would that look like over time if most people are unlikely to see it? And we have to assume most people are unlikely to see it, because that's been our human history.